She raised her glass, smiled sweetly at everyone on the patio, and said loudly enough for the whole birthday crowd to hear, "Well, if Ethan ever drops the ball, at least I've got Daniel to keep me entertained." Everyone laughed, everyone except me. And when she winked at him, when they all looked at me like I was the harmless, clueless husband, I realized they thought I'd do nothing. But I did. And when I did, the entire house went silent. Before I dive into what happened that night, hit the subscribe button, drop a like to support the channel, and let me know in the comments what you would have done. Now let's get into IT. Started on a warm Saturday evening. One of those too perfect suburban gatherings, the kind where everyone pretends their life is flawless while secretly comparing lawns and marriages. My wife, Lauren, had insisted we host a combined birthday party for both of us, even though our birthdays were 2 weeks apart. She said it was cute. I said it was unnecessary. She won. The backyard looked like something out of a magazine: string lights, a rented margarita machine, those useless fancy candles that do nothing against mosquitoes. About 40 people milled around: co-workers, neighbors, old friends I barely remembered, and a handful of her gym buddies who looked like they lived on protein shakes and compliments that I kept myself busy manning the grill. It gave me an excuse to stay out of conversations that always turned into small talk about mortgages or diets. My mood wasn't great, but I played along. After 20 years together, you learn when to keep your head down and let the evening pass. Then I saw him. Daniel. Tall, athletic, annoyingly confident, the kind of guy who wears a simple t-shirt like it's tailored. I faintly remembered meeting him once, years ago, friend of a friend, someone Lauren used to know through church events, whatever that meant. I didn't think anything of it until I noticed he wasn't just attending the party, he was with her, standing next to her, laughing with her, leaning in close like he owned the air around her. That I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. Maybe they just caught up after years. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But something in the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, something in the way he looked at her like they had a secret, something wasn't right. I kept grilling, kept pretending, kept swallowing the bitterness. Then came the moment that cracked the night in half. Lauren's friend Brittany, already tipsy and giggling like a teenager, clinked her glass with a fork. Bad sign number one. She loved being the center of attention, and drunk Brittany was 10 times worse. "Everybody," she shouted, wobbling just enough to make people hold their breath. "Let's make a toast to the birthday boy and girl." People cheered, lifted glasses, turned toward the patio steps where Brittany stood with Lauren and Daniel beside her. I wiped my hands on a towel and watched from the grill, already bracing for something stupid. Brittany threw her arm around Lauren. 20 years with this guy," she laughed. "Impressive, girl. But honestly, you're a genius." I frowned. "Genius for what?" Brittany continued, slurring just enough to be dangerous. "Because if Ethan ever slips up, you've got your backup right here." She grabbed Daniel's wrist and yanked him forward like she was presenting a prize on a game show. The crowd erupted in laughter. Daniel didn't look embarrassed. He didn't look caught off guard. He looked pleased, like he'd been waiting for the spotlight. But the worst part, Lauren laughed too. Not a shy laugh. Not a "stop, that's inappropriate" laugh. A real, delighted, glowing laugh. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a man she's already imagined excuses for. And for a moment, I wasn't standing behind a grill in my own backyard. I was outside my own life, watching it tilt sideways. Someone nudged me playfully. "Guess you better watch out, Ethan." More laughter. I didn't move, didn't react, didn't smile. I just watched her, watched the little flash of guilt cross her face when she finally realized I'd heard it all. But the guilt vanished almost instantly, replaced by that same too calm expression, the expression of someone who believes, deep down, that you won't do anything. They all thought I'd laugh it off. They all thought I'd swallow it like I always did. And that was the moment, quiet, heavy, precise, when something inside me clicked. I set the spatula down, wiped my hands again, took one slow breath. A cold, steady calm washed over me. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. Lauren noticed me walking toward them and pasted on a smile like everything was fine. I didn't say a word. Not yet. But every person at that party felt the shift. Conversations softened. Eyes followed me. Even the music seemed to dim. They had no idea what was coming. Neither did she. I didn't rush. That was the part that seemed to scare them the most. No raised voice, no forced smile, no witty comeback. Just steady footsteps across the patio as the laughter slowly withered in the air. Lauren's smile twitched like she wasn't sure which version of me she should expect. The harmless Ethan who let things slide, or someone she didn't quite recognize. When I reached the group, Brittany froze mid-giggle. Daniel straightened his shoulders like he was preparing for a handshake instead of a fallout, and the rest of the patio tilted just slightly toward me, waiting. The whole backyard felt like it inhaled and held its breath. I looked at Lauren first. She tried to speak, but I lifted a hand, not to silence her aggressively, just a calm gesture, the kind that tells everyone you're in control. My voice came out quiet but sharp enough to cut through every whisper. A backup, huh? A few nervous laughs bubbled from the edges of the group. Those died quickly when they saw my expression. That's cute, I added, just loud enough to carry across the patio. Clever planning. Lauren's face softened, relieved, like she thought I was going to play along. Daniel smirked as if he'd just been crowned something. Even Brittany exhaled, convinced she'd escaped consequences. They had no idea that calm wasn't forgiveness. It was the kind of calm a man gets when he finally stops lying to himself. I looked at Daniel next. He stood tall, too tall, like a man who expected me to crumble or laugh awkwardly. He had that gym body swagger, the type of confidence that works on everyone except the one man who's finally had enough. He stuck his hands in his pockets and tilted his chin, waiting for whatever joke he thought I was about to make. But I wasn't joking. I stepped closer until I was only a foot from him. His smirk thinned. The energy shifted, subtle but undeniable. What exactly, I asked quietly, does being her backup involve? A few people coughed. Someone set a drink down too hard on the patio table. No one dared answer. Daniel's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Lauren reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, but I moved just slightly out of her reach. That simple movement felt louder than shouting. She tried again. Ethan, come on, it was a joke. You're taking it the wrong way. I finally turned to her fully. Her eyes flicked between mine, searching for some softness, some crack in the armor. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional at all. And that frightened her, because she knew me well enough to know that when I stopped reacting, something irreversible had shifted. If it was a joke, I said, why were you laughing before anyone else did? She flinched. A genuine, small, involuntary flinch. And the crowd noticed. Brittany jumped in, desperate to patch the sinking ship she'd helped launch. It was just girl talk, Ethan. Light fun. We tease each other all the time. I cut her off without raising my voice. Then why is he standing here? Everyone turned to look at Daniel. He stiffened like a soldier who suddenly found himself on the wrong side of the battlefield. If it was girl talk, I continued, why does the punchline come with a guy attached to it? No one had an answer. Lauren looked down. Brittany stared at the pool like it might offer escape. A couple of neighbors drifted backward, suddenly fascinated by the buffet table. That I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Instead, I did something simple. Something small enough to look almost harmless, but heavy enough to make the entire backyard tilt. I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of my birthday gift from Lauren, a silver watch she'd insisted I wear tonight. I unclasped it slowly, deliberately, and placed it on the patio table between us. It wasn't about the watch. It was about the symbolism, removing something she'd given me, setting it down like returning borrowed time. A ripple of whispers moved through the guests. Daniel swallowed hard. Lauren stepped forward again. Ethan, why are you doing this? She whispered. Her voice wasn't angry or indignant. It was nervous, unsure, afraid of something not yet spoken. I leaned in just slightly, just enough for her to hear every word. but not enough to make the moment private. Because I'm done letting people treat me like I'm lucky to be here, I said. I'm not competing with anyone for my own marriage. Her eyes widened, and for the first time that night, the mask slipped. I saw guilt. I saw panic. And beneath all that, I saw something else, recognition. Recognition that she had pushed too far. Daniel tried to salvage his pride. Hey man, nobody's competing. We're just messing around. I turned my head toward him slowly. No expression, no anger, just steady. And that broke whatever confidence he had left. He stepped back without realizing he'd done it. Silence spread like a shadow. Even the music seemed to understand it was the wrong time to continue. I didn't make a speech. I didn't lash out. I simply said, enjoy the party. Then I walked past them, past the stunned guests, past the kitchen, and into the house. I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door. A few people moved aside as I stepped through the living room, lowering their drinks as if they'd been caught doing something wrong. I didn't look at any of them. I didn't look back at all. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove away while 40 people stood in my backyard unsure whether the party was over or whether they'd just witnessed the beginning of something no one knew how to name. I didn't know either. All I knew was that the silence in that car felt cleaner than the noise I'd left behind. I didn't go far that night. I drove until the streetlights thinned out and the roads got quieter, then pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot. The neon glow flickered above the asphalt, humming softly like it understood the kind of night I was having. I turned off the engine and sat there with my hands still on the wheel. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't yelling. I felt strangely steady, like my mind had finally locked into a gear it should have found years ago. The phone buzzed in the cup holder, Lauren's name flashing again and again. Calls, texts, missed calls, more texts. I didn't read a single one. I wasn't ready to hear excuses dressed up as explanations. After 20 minutes, I turned the phone face down and leaned back in the seat, letting the quiet sink into me. For the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like defeat. It felt like clarity. After about an hour, I drove to a 24-hour diner near the edge of town, one of those places with old vinyl booths and a waitress who calls everyone honey whether she means it or not. I slid into a booth by the window. The waitress poured me coffee without asking. I drank it slowly, staring out at the empty parking lot. That's when the adrenaline wore off and something heavier crept in, a long, dull ache of realization. Not pain, not heartbreak. More like I'd been carrying something for years and only now recognized how heavy it had been. And I wondered, quietly, how long had I been this absent from my own marriage? How long had she been drifting away while I convinced myself things were fine? The waitress came by again. You all right, sweetheart? She asked in a tone that suggested she'd seen this look before on plenty of tired faces. I nodded. Rough night. She gave a small, understanding smile and topped off my cup. They all end eventually, she said. I wasn't sure which they she meant, nights or marriages, but either way, she wasn't wrong. Around midnight, I finally looked at my phone. 16 missed calls, 27 texts. The last one said, "Please come home. We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned the phone off completely and slid it into my jacket pocket. Whatever conversation she wanted to have, it wasn't happening while I was still raw from the humiliation she'd allowed to happen. I went home just before dawn. Not to talk, to gather what I needed. I parked a block away, not wanting neighbors to see or ask questions. The house was dark. Good. I let myself in quietly, the way you move when entering a place that isn't quite home anymore. The smell of spilled margarita mix and leftover food drifted from the kitchen. Cups still scattered, plates half full, confetti stuck to the floor. She hadn't cleaned. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she spent the night waiting for me to return. It didn't matter. The house felt cold in a way that wasn't about temperature. I went upstairs and packed a bag. Just essentials at first. Clothes, toiletries, important papers. Then I saw something on the nightstand that made me stop. A small photo in a wooden frame. It was from years ago, A trip we took to the mountains. She was leaning against me with her head on my shoulder. I stared at that photo, trying to remember what that moment had felt like. I couldn't. Not clearly. It felt like remembering someone else's life. I put the frame face down on her dresser. Her workout clothes were still neatly folded. A gym bag half opened on the floor. For a second, I wondered if she had worn those clothes to meet Daniel. Then I stopped myself. That was a road that led nowhere good except deeper into questions that didn't need answers. I was halfway finished packing when I noticed her tablet plugged in beside the bed. The screen lit up with a notification, something that made my pulse shift. A message preview with just enough words to freeze me in place. I shouldn't look, I thought. I shouldn't open it. But I did. And once I started, I couldn't stop. Messages between her and Daniel. Weeks of them. Dozens. Nothing sexual, but intimately familiar in the way people get when they forget boundaries. Jokes about things I didn't know. Complaints about things I never realized she resented. Late-night exchanges with timestamps at hours when she'd told me she was exhausted and already asleep. My chest tightened, not from betrayal alone, but from how effortless the lies looked on the screen. She wrote to him in a tone she hadn't used with me in years. One message from a week ago hit harder than the rest. Can't wait to see you at the party. It'll be fun. His reply, always better when you're there. Her response, don't make me blush. That one stayed on the screen for a long time. I didn't feel anger. I felt confirmation. A puzzle clicking into place that I took photos of everything. Not out of revenge. Not out of rage. Out of self-defense. Proof. Evidence of the truth she'd deny later. After that, I packed the rest of my bag, zipped it shut, and left the room without looking back. As I walked down the stairs, I heard a faint sound, footsteps on the second floor. She was awake. I didn't wait. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not yet. I slipped out the front door quietly and drove away before she had the chance to try and stop me. I didn't go back to the diner. I didn't drive aimlessly. I went to the one place I knew I'd be welcome without questions, my brother Mark's house. When he opened the door, the hallway light behind him casting a warm glow, he didn't even ask what happened. He just stepped aside and said, "Guest room's ready. Coffee in the morning." That was it. And that was enough that I slept a little that night. Or maybe I just closed my eyes until morning arrived. When the sun came through the blinds, I felt something odd, relief. As if leaving the house hadn't been an escape, but a release. A starting point I never expected to reach. By noon, my phone was buzzing again. I knew I'd have to answer eventually. But not yet. Not before I understood what I wanted. Not before I figured out whether this marriage was something to salvage or something I had already walked away from without realizing it. I didn't know the answer yet. But I knew this. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be me pretending anymore. The next few days felt like I was living in two different worlds. In one, I went to work, drank coffee, answered emails, pretended everything was normal. In the other, I was sitting in my brother Mark's spare bedroom every night, staring at the ceiling and replaying that backyard scene in slow motion. The laugh, the wink, the way everyone looked at me like I was harmless. Those images stuck to me like wet paint. Mark didn't push. He gave me space, meals, a couch when I needed it, silence when I didn't feel like talking. But on the third night, he finally sat beside me on the porch and said, "You going back?" I exhaled slowly. "I don't know." "You do know," he said calmly. "You're just afraid to say it yet." Maybe he was right. Or maybe I just needed more proof that I wasn't walking away over one drunken joke. I wanted clarity, something solid. And clarity came sooner than I expected. On Wednesday, Lauren called Mark's phone. I could tell by the way his eyebrows lifted when he looked at the screen. "You want me to answer?" he asked. "Put it on speaker." Her voice was tight, like she'd been crying or trying not to. "Can you please have Ethan call me? This is crazy. We need to talk. He can't just leave and ignore me." I said nothing. Mark kept his voice neutral. "He'll call when he's ready." "Ready for what?" she snapped. "There's nothing to be ready for. This is being blown out of proportion." She sounded desperate, defensive, unsteady. And that only confirmed everything I'd felt since the party. When the call ended, Mark looked at me. She's scrambling. Good, I said before I even realized the word had left my mouth. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those messages between her and Daniel. The tone, the timing, the way she'd complained about me to him like he was her confidant instead of me, her husband of 20 years. I got out of bed quietly, grabbed my laptop, and began digging through old bank statements, phone records, and receipts. Not because I wanted to torture myself, but because something inside me needed a timeline. Needed to know when exactly the marriage had shifted underneath me. I found gym charges from months ago at times she'd said she was at work. Lunches at places she claimed she never had time to go. A pattern, subtle but undeniable. Every discovery wasn't a dagger. It was a brick being removed from a wall I'd leaned on for years. Around midnight, Mark walked in with a bowl of leftover pasta and set it beside me. He glanced at the screen and let out a low whistle. You're investigating your own life. Feels like it, I said. He pulled up a chair. You finding what you thought you'd find? No, I answered. I'm finding exactly what I didn't want to admit. He nodded slowly. Sometimes that's what finally sets you free. Free. The word hung in the air like a light. I wasn't ready to walk toward YET to I in the morning. I knew I had to go back to the house. Not to stay, but to collect the last of my things. I waited until I knew she'd be at work. The driveway was empty. The house felt lifeless when I opened the door, like it was holding its breath. I packed more clothes, some books, my tools from the garage. I walked room to room, disconnecting myself piece by piece from the life we'd built. It was painful in a quiet, heavy way, not the sharp sting of betrayal, but the slow ache of surrendering something that had already died. As I was pulling down a box from the closet shelf, I heard a sound, a soft vibration. Her tablet, still plugged in. Another message from Daniel. This time the preview read, "Are you sure you're okay? Want to meet later?" I felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not surprise, just confirmation. I didn't open the message. I didn't want details anymore. I didn't need them. I took a picture of the screen and walked away. I loaded the car, locked the house, and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. I looked at the front door, the porch, the windows where we'd once put holiday lights. The home that had felt like mine for so long now looked like a place I was trespassing in. I backed out of the driveway slowly, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror until it disappeared behind the trees. That afternoon, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Ethan," a man asked hesitantly. "It's Graham." I was at the party. I vaguely remembered him, one of Lauren's co-workers. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. Look, this is uncomfortable, but I feel like you should know something." My grip tightened on the phone. "Go on." He sighed. "That joke Brittany made? It wasn't spontaneous. They talked about it days before. It was planned." My eyes closed for a moment. Not shocked, validated. "Who planned it?" I asked. "Both of them," he said. "Lauren said it'd be harmless. She said you'd laugh." I didn't speak for a moment. Graham cleared his throat. "I'm sorry. After you left, the whole mood changed. A lot of us felt awful. I should have said something sooner." I thanked him and hung up. The truth wasn't a knife anymore. It was a key, and I was finally unlocking the last door between me and the exit. When I got back to Mark's house, he looked at me the way someone looks at a man who has already made a decision he hasn't spoken aloud yet. "You ready?" he asked. I sat down heavily. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." That night, I emailed a lawyer. A real one. Direct, efficient, recommended by a coworker who'd survived a brutal divorce. I didn't tell Lauren. I didn't warn her. I didn't know her a soft landing when she'd spent months digging a hole beneath my feet. The next morning, as I sat in the lawyer's office signing papers that would begin unraveling 2 decades of marriage, I felt steady, clear, certain. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. When I walked out into the daylight afterward, It felt like stepping into a life that hadn't claimed me yet, but was waiting patiently for me to claim it. Whatever came next, I wasn't afraid anymore. When the divorce papers were served 2 days later, the storm began. Lauren called Mark's phone within minutes, crying, furious, pleading, all in the same breath. He didn't hand me the phone until she calmed down enough to speak in sentences. Ethan, why? Why would you do this without talking to me first? She asked, her voice trembling like she was the one who'd been blindsided. I let the silence stretch long enough for her to feel it. Because talking stopped being useful the moment you invited another man into our marriage, I said evenly. Nothing happened with him, she burst out. It was just talking. You're throwing away 20 years over some stupid messages and a dumb joke. No, I replied. I'm ending it because I finally realized I've been alone in this marriage for a long time. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, small, like someone trying to pick up shards of something they never expected to break. Can we meet? Please. One time. I need to look you in the eye. Against my better judgment, I agreed, but only in a public place and only with my lawyer nearby. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I didn't want any more manipulation, tears, or emotional games. We met at a diner on the east side of town. Neutral ground, full of witnesses, just in case either of us forgot how to act like adults. She looked exhausted when she walked in. Thinner, paler, as if the last weeks had taken something from her. She slid into the booth across from me and folded her hands on the table like a student awaiting a verdict. Thank you for meeting me, she said softly. I nodded once, waiting. I know I messed up, she continued. I know I should have shut down the joke. I know the messages look bad. I didn't react. She swallowed. But I wasn't cheating. I swear to you. I leaned forward slightly. If I had done what you did, texting another woman late at night, joking with her, complaining about you, meeting her for lunch while lying about where I was, would you call that cheating? She pressed her lips together, eyes filling with tears. I didn't mean to hurt you. Intent doesn't undo impact, I said. A tear dropped onto her hand, but I didn't reach to wipe it away. That version of me, the one who tried to fix everything, was gone. She wiped her cheek and looked up. I thought we could fix this. Counseling, something. I thought maybe we still had a chance. Chance at what? I asked. A marriage built on pretending? A marriage where you keep someone else on the sidelines, just in case? I'm not living like that. She nodded slowly, almost like she'd been expecting that answer, but hoped to hear something else. So that's it, she whispered. You're just done? I'm done being someone's second option, I replied. The waitress approached and asked if we wanted food. We both said no. She left us alone again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Lauren reached across the table, her fingers trembling, as if touching my hand might change the outcome. I pulled mine back before she could. What about the house? She asked, voice cracking. The furniture? Everything. Keep whatever you want, I said. I don't care about things. She blinked in surprise. What about him? Who? I asked flatly. Daniel, she whispered. Do you want me to stop talking to him? Do you want me to block him? I will. What you do with him is none of my concern, I said. You're free now. The word free hit her like a slap. She flinched. Her eyes filled again. I didn't want freedom, she whispered. Yes, I said quietly. You did. You just didn't want the consequences that came with it. She covered her face with both hands and cried. Quietly, desperately, like someone finally seeing the wreckage they caused. I watched her cry without moving, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood that her tears were no longer my responsibility. After a few minutes, I stood up and placed a $10 bill on the table for the coffee. My lawyer has the papers, I said. Sign them when you're ready. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Please don't leave like this, she begged. How should I leave? I asked. Angry? Broken? Humiliated? No, I'm leaving with my dignity, finally. And I walked out of that diner without looking back once. Roger, my lawyer, caught up to me in the parking lot. You handled that well, he said. She's going to sign. I can tell. Good, I said quietly. I want this done. 2 months later, it was. The divorce finalized on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I wasn't sad. I wasn't relieved. I felt clean, like a weight I'd carried for years had finally been lifted off my shoulders. I moved into a small house across town, a simple place with a quiet yard and a blank slate. No shared memories, no shadows in the corners. I started working out again, focused on my job, rebuilt my routines piece by piece. I didn't date right away. I wasn't looking for anyone. I was looking for myself. And then, unexpectedly, I met someone. Not through friends or apps, just at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning. Her name was Claire. She laughed easily, talked honestly, and didn't carry chaos in her pocket. We talked. Then we kept talking. And eventually, without forcing anything, it became something gentle and real. Something I didn't have to question. Something I didn't have to compete for. Months passed. One evening, as I was driving home from Claire's place, I saw Lauren at a gas station. She was pumping fuel into her car, hair pulled back, shoulders slouched. She looked smaller, tired, alone. She didn't see me. I kept driving, not out of bitterness, but because some chapters don't get epilogues. They just end out a year after the party. She messaged me online. A long apology, a confession, an admission that I had been right all along. About her, about Daniel, about the marriage. I read it once, typed back 2 words. I'm happy. Then I deleted the thread. Today, I sit in my backyard grilling steaks on a new grill, listening to the quiet, feeling the peace that used to feel impossible. I didn't lose anything that night at the party. I walked away with the only thing worth keeping, my self-respect. And it led me to a better life than the one I left behind. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment. Your support keeps these stories coming.